Hello, everybody. We've now come to the next part of the Joseph story. We've had 4 videos describing what happened in his life, and now we're coming to the 5th video to see what happened next in his life, in his story. It's a fantastic story, and we're really coming to an exciting part of the story now. I've called this part 5, and the thought particularly is being found out. You remember that Joseph had had a time in prison, even though he hadn't done anything wrong, but he was brought out of the prison into the palace because he could tell Pharaoh what his dreams meant. And Pharaoh had given him a ring and a robe. He'd made him prime minister because Joseph had told him what the dreams meant, and Joseph had told him what he should do. Well, as Joseph said, there were 7 years of very good harvest. All the farmers had far more corn than they needed, and they put 1/5 of their corn into Joseph's storehouses. So he was storing up corn all through those 7 years. And then it stopped raining, and then it got very dry, and the crops withered and couldn't grow. Everything was very difficult, and the people would have been very hungry indeed in Egypt if it hadn't been for Joseph. 7 long years of famine. So Joseph opened his storehouses, and to everybody who came to the storehouses, he had plenty of corn to sell for everybody. Nobody in Egypt went hungry. Back in Canaan, things were getting very difficult for Joseph's family. You see, their crops had not grown properly. They had the same famine in Canaan as there was in Egypt. And Jacob said, listen, boys, I've heard that down in Egypt there's food. We've got money. You'll have to go down to Egypt and buy some corn and get it back to us as quickly as you can. Otherwise, we're all going to die in this famine. 10 of you can go. I'm not letting Benjamin, my youngest son, go. He's too young. It's too far to go. But you go and get some corn and bring it back as soon as you can. Well, Benjamin stayed behind. Jacob and Benjamin said goodbye, and they set off for Egypt. And eventually they got there. Just like when Joseph went there, it was a very strange experience. They couldn't speak the language. They didn't understand the customs. They saw all these remarkable buildings. There was nothing like this in Canaan at all. And eventually they got to the storehouse where they could buy some corn to take back to their father. And then there was Joseph. He was working at the storehouse, and he suddenly saw his brothers. He recognized them. They didn't recognize him at all. He spoke Egyptian. He had Egyptian clothes on. He looked very important. They didn't even consider that it might have been their brother. And Joseph looked at them and he thought, they're my brothers. They're going to have to learn lessons because of what they did to me and how they sold me as a slave and sent me off to Egypt, not bothering at all about what would happen to me. He said, you're spies. You've come from Canaan to spy on what's happening in Egypt. You don't deserve to have any corn. You're spies. No, they said, we're the part of a good family. Our father, he's an old man, and we've got a younger brother. We've just come down to buy some corn because if we don't get corn, we're going to die in Canaan. Joseph said, no, I don't believe you. You're spies. And he had them put in prison. When they were in prison, they began to feel very guilty. They said, we're being punished for what we did to our brother all those years ago. We were so cruel to him. We sold him. They felt very guilty and thought, maybe we're being punished for what we did all those years ago. Well, eventually, after 3 days, they were let out. But Joseph said, look, you can buy some corn and you can pay for it, but one of you will have to stay. And he looked at Simeon and he said, you'll have to stay. And Simeon was put in prison, and the rest were able to buy the corn, and then they went back home to Jacob. And Jacob looked at them and said, I sent 10 of you. There's only 9 come back. What's happened to the other one? And then they told the story. Poor Jacob, he was so upset. He thought, I've lost Joseph. Now I've lost Simeon. What's going to happen? And then they said, look, when we go back to Egypt again, the man in charge said, if we don't take our younger brother Benjamin, we won't be able to buy corn, and it will prove to him that we're spies and we'll be shut up. We may even be put to death. We've got to take Benjamin the next time. And Jacob said, no way. No way are you going to take Benjamin. He's my favorite son. Now Joseph is gone, and I'm not going to let you take Benjamin at all. He was very determined that they could never take Benjamin. But unfortunately, the food ran out again. What were they going to do? We'll have to go back to Egypt, they said. We'll have to get more corn. And Jacob said, well, off you go. And they said, well, we can't go. We've got to take Benjamin. He said that if we don't take Benjamin, Simeon will not be released and we'll all be put in prison. And nothing will ever be heard or seen of us again. Jacob thought, well, what should we do? He thought, I've not got a choice. And then Judah said, listen, Dad, he said, I'll take responsibility for Benjamin. I'll look after him. I won't let him out of my sight. I make sure he's kept well and looked after and protected all the way down to Canaan, all the way down to Egypt, and all the way back again. He'll be all right. You leave him with me. So off they went. Jacob wasn't happy, but eventually with Benjamin, they took that long journey all the way down to Egypt. When they got there, they met the man in charge, not Joseph, but the man he put in charge of the barns and the storehouses. And they said, we've come back to get some more corn. And the man said, all right, that's fine. And then he said, I've got an invitation for you. You're to have a meal in the palace with the prime minister. They didn't realize, of course, that the prime minister was Joseph. They couldn't understand what was happening. And they thought maybe it's because of what happened, because something very strange had happened. You see, what had happened was this. When they got back home with the first supply of corn, they looked in their bags and there was the money that they had paid for the corn, and it was put back again. And they thought, here we are in the palace. The prime minister is going to come. He's going to shut us up completely. Benjamin's going to be shut up too, because we didn't pay for the first lot of corn. But the man in charge of the storehouses said, don't worry at all. Don't look so scared. The money was there. I was paid the money. Everything's fine. Probably what had happened, though they didn't know this, Joseph had made sure that the money was put back into their sacks. But the man in charge said, everything's fine. So there they were. Simeon is released, and they come into the palace of Joseph. And he asks some questions. He says, is your father that you mentioned still alive? Yes, he said. He's alive. He's not very happy because we're all down here. He's all on his own, but he's alive. And is this your younger brother? And he looked and he saw Benjamin and he thought, my, he's changed quite a lot. It's 13 years since I've seen him. He's grown up now. And Joseph was quite amazed at how Benjamin had grown. But he didn't say, look, you're all my brothers. He thought they've still got lessons to learn. But what he did, though, was go into a quiet place and he cried. He thought, at long last, I've seen my brothers. And at long last, I can see that they're looking after my younger brother. Not like the way they treated me. They must have changed. They're different people. And my younger brother, he looked so fine. And he cried. He was so pleased to see what had happened. Well, something to think about. We'll have to see what happened in the final Joseph video. But here's something to think about, that the Bible has an important lesson to tell us. The Bible says this, be sure your sin will find you out. Be sure your sin will find you out. You see, what they had done all those years ago, suddenly they were being punished and felt guilty because of it. I think for the first time since it happened, they felt sorry because now they had been found out. I remember hearing the story of somebody who robbed a shop, and the shopkeeper chased him up the main street of this town. And he saw this doorway open and he thought, I'll nip into that doorway and I'll be safe. And the shopkeeper won't see where I've gone. Unfortunately, the doorway that he jumped into was the police station. And immediately that man was arrested For him, it was certainly true that what he had done had been found out almost immediately. That encourages us and challenges us, doesn't it, to think about what we do, because sooner or later, somebody will find out if we've done something that we shouldn't have done. So as we come to the end of the 5th video, what's going to happen next to Joseph? What's going to happen next to his brothers? Is Benjamin going to get back safely to Jacob? Well, we'll have to see in the next video when we get to that. Thank you for listening.